Welcome. This is the Drupal usability meeting for August 19th, 2022. I'm Benji Fisher, moderating and sharing my screen. And also on the meeting are Diego Rodrigo da Silva, Aaron McHale, Daniel, I'm sorry, I just see Daniel CB, and Thomas Howell. And no, I don't see everyone. Zoom is not showing me the other members of the meeting. That's a little frustrating. Let's see, I see a full list of names in the chat window. So Emily Nouveau, Lucas Barbosa de Almeida, Lucas Cruz, and Ralph Kohler. I think now I've mentioned everyone. And again, does anyone have an issue they'd like to discuss? If not, I've prepared a couple. So let's dive into this one. For the sake of the recording, this is issue 2350939. And the title is Implement a Generic Revision UI. Let me see. And so, point is that for nodes, well, here, let me say, yesterday I set up a fresh copy of Drupal with the Umami installation profile. So this is the result of the out-of-the-box initiative. It has some sample content. It has a custom theme. And here I'm looking at one of the recipes from the site. And you can see that I've modified the issue title and added a silly version 2 to the body text. So, and a recipe is a node. And when you make changes to a node, it saves the history and gives you a revisions tab, which shows the original version. So I guess that timestamp is when I installed the site. And 14 minutes later is when I edited the node. So we have the current revision and we have the original version. I can delete old revisions. I can also revert to an old revision. Why don't I go ahead and do that? And you'll see that what happens is that I keep the old revision, I keep the revision that I made, and then I get a copy of the original revision. And if I then go back and view the page, well, that's funny. The breadcrumb still says v2, but the title and the body go back to the original. They no longer say version 2. Let me just clear caches. I wonder if that will fix the breadcrumb. I'm typing in a window that I'm not sharing, but I'm just clearing caches. And now I'll reload the page. Yes, clearing caches did fix the breadcrumb. So for nodes, that's something that has been in Drupal for a long time. Any questions about this? Here we go. All right, I finally got the right window open in Zoom. It's always a little tricky when you're sharing your screen to find the right windows in Zoom. And I see that Alfred has joined us, and Giovanni. Okay, so that is how it works for nodes, but it only works for nodes. And there are various things in Drupal that can have revisions. So taxonomy terms, custom blocks, although by default, you don't save a new revision every time you edit a block. You have the option of enabling revisions, media items. But as of now, only nodes have this revisions tab that gives you a way to control revisions and revert to a previous one or to delete an old revision. So this issue, for those who've joined late, implemented generic revision UI. This issue is about giving some consistency and making it easier for module developers to provide the revisions tab for whatever entity types their modules provide. And I've applied the patch from the issue, and I've also installed some custom modules that rely on that patch. So I think it mentions in the steps to reproduce that if you want to, if you want the revisions tab for media, you have to enable this media revisions UI module. I've installed that. If you want revisions for blocks, then you have to install the block content revision UI module, and I have done that too. And since I've already done those preparation steps, here I have a media item, chocolate brownie umami, and I already edited it yesterday and added again the silly version 2.0 to the alt text and to the name. I can save that. And if we look at, I'm sorry, when I save it, I go back to the listing page. So I go back to the edit page for this one. I now have the revisions tab. It has the original version. It has the version that I created last night, and it has the one that I made just now. And I can revert an old revision. I'm sorry, I can delete an old revision, or I can revert to that old revision, and reverting will, there's some question about the terminology for revert. It actually creates a new revision. The old one is still there in the history, but the copy of the revision becomes the current one. And this goes back to version 2 instead of 2.0. Any questions at this point?
No questions.
Okay.
I might have a quick question. Will those contrib media revision UI and the contrib block content revision UI be ported into core at some point? At least for functionalities like block and media, which are in core already, because I've also tried to apply the patch 1 or 2 days ago, and I've overread the part that you have to install contrib modules. And I was confused because those revision tabs haven't shown up. And I imagine at a later point, if this functionality gets in, for contrib modules using the functionality, it might be useful, but for example, core functionality like block and media, it might be missed.
Yes, but just for managing scope, that won't happen in this issue. This issue will put in the framework, and then we can consider in later issues whether we want to implement it for blocks and media or taxonomy terms, for example.
Yeah, I just wanted for clarification, and all good. Thank you.
Sure. So let's look at another tab where I was, I guess, first over here. For block types, the Umami profile has several different custom block types. For the disclaimer block, initially this box was unchecked, and when I set up the site last night, I enabled revisions for this particular block type. And I again made simple changes to the title and the body of this disclaimer block. And you can see the revisions on the revision tab. There's the original. I guess you only see two because I didn't enable revisions until after I made a couple of changes. So there's the original. Let me open that in a new tab where it says v2.0. So that was when I enabled revisions, and then the current one is 2.1. So again, we have these two revisions. We can revert. I guess we don't have the option of deleting the original revision, which is kind of odd. And do you notice something else that's different about the block revisions from the node and media revisions? Anyone who's trying to answer, you're all muted. Let me again go to the revisions of this media item and the revisions of this node and the revisions of this block. Go ahead, Ralph.
I've typed it already in the chat. It doesn't use the admin theme. It uses.
Yes, I did promise to keep an eye on the chat, and I.
No worries. No worries.
Sure. Right. So this page uses the front end theme. It doesn't use the admin theme. So that is one inconsistency, and I think that's worth discussing. Certainly, the module that provides blocks or media or some other custom entity, the module can choose whether or not to use the admin theme. So the question is, what should the default be? Should the default be to use the admin theme? Claro in this case. Or should we default to using the front end theme? And I think a similar question came up on the permissions form for entities. So go ahead, Aaron, you wanted to say something.
Well, I think the delete option is there. I think just the drop down arrow next to revert is not visible, which seems to be a usability bug or accessibility or usability with Umami. That's not. But again, that's probably an example of where like things that are typically meant for the admin UI, like this sort of split button, are now being rendered in the front end UI. And yeah, it's an interesting question of should we have a recommended approach of this should be done in the admin UI or not? And I'm not sure if I have an answer for that right now.
Okay. So I kind of think that we should be consistent, and if the node revision UI uses the admin theme, we should make that the default for others. And I think the fact, as you pointed out, that it has this usability bug that the drop down isn't visible until you hover over it, supports the idea that we should be using the admin theme, which sort of expects to render elements like this.
So I noticed the ones for nodes have a yellow background on the current revision, whereas the other ones don't have that. So I wonder if there's something that's been missed when they, because I think generally it was like almost like copying and pasting what was already there for nodes. So I wonder if something's been missed off.
Good point. And I do believe that consistency is one part of usability, that making things more consistent tends to make it more usable. So this row has the class revision-current. And the other two rows don't have that class. This is on the node revisions, and that presumably is responsible for the highlight color. Yes, revision current gives the background. If I disable that CSS rule, the highlighting goes away. And this row, it does have the revision-current class. But the CSS doesn't seem to apply. Go ahead.
I wonder actually if it's maybe that's the node modules providing that then. So that would be something that needs further investigation.
Right. So presumably the node module attaches some library with CSS that gets attached to this page, but not that doesn't get out of here. So I guess those are. It seems to me that that's a further argument for using the admin theme by default on all of these pages, so that you will get the you'll get that intended highlighting.
I think also because I've been close to this issue for some time, so I guess to help frame the discussion slightly, there's two ways that, like, two distinctively different ways this can be implemented in terms of how someone would implement it. The first is on like on core entity types, as we're looking at, like block and media and things like that. And in an ideal world, this generic implementation, if you like, will also then eventually replace the node specific implementation. So I think there's an issue for that somewhere. So I guess we have an opportunity here to probably not make any drastic changes, but if there's any improvements in terms of the wording or things that would be quick wins that we could potentially get in here, or in follow-up issues, because the revision UI probably hasn't been looked at as a whole for some time. This would be a good opportunity to get those improvements in it, either in this issue, but probably more likely in follow-ups. And then the other side is this being available for contrib and custom code to use. And so the example of do we render the revision list with the front-end theme or the admin theme? Do we leave that up to each entity type? For core, I think there's certainly an argument to say all the core entity types, should probably use the admin theme, or at least they should follow whatever pattern that Node currently does. But then do we want to, we can't really enforce that for contrib or custom code because they have the flexibility to make that decision. And there might be situations where you know, that it is appropriate for in a contrib or custom situation that the front end theme is used over the admin theme. So hopefully that helps a little in framing things, but I do think that whatever Node is doing, we should try and follow that at the moment.
Okay, and I see in chat that Emily also agrees that it should use the admin theme consistently. And looking at the issue, I see there's this related issue, switch node revision UI to generic UI. It's marked as postponed. So presumably, once the issue we're looking at gets in, that's the issue for using the new code that this is adding in the node module rather than
Right.
the current implementation. So that's what you mentioned. There were also a couple of comments that specifically referenced usability issues. I think it was 108 and 109. Just trying to scroll. There we go. But I think actually those questions have already been discussed on the issue. So I think most of these questions are sort of implementation issues, whether the node module should use this. And I think it's been agreed to postpone that to a follow-up issue, as we were just discussing, whether we should generate local tasks. And what that means is whether it should appear as one of these tabs. Local tasks is sort of the code word for tabs on a page. Thomas and Lucas are adding +1, but I'm not sure what you're agreeing to. Agreeing to providing local tasks, what I'm currently talking about?
Oh no, previously about consistently using the admin theme.
Okay. Shall we have a quick show of hands on that before we go on to anything else? Does anyone else want to give a +1 to using the admin theme? Thomas, Lucas, Barbosa, Emily. Thomas is giving a thumbs up also in the chat. Lucas Cruz. Does anyone disagree with using? Oh, Diego is giving a thumbs up. Does anyone disagree with using the admin theme?
I don't disagree. I just have a question, because Node has this thing where you can say whether you want to use the front end or the admin theme for like editing. I believe the default behavior is that use the admin theme for when editing. But I just wondered, Benji, if you could maybe go into, I think it's an appearance, and just turn off that option. And then I'd be interested to see if the revision UI still uses the admin theme, or if it then switches to the front end theme.
So this is media. Presumably we won't affect that.
Yeah, it
Here's the note.
switches, it does switch. I was
Okay.
just,
So I wonder if that's something, because then if we make a decision here to recommend that the revision UI should be using the admin theme, then that has implications for this as well.
That's a good point. It is more complicated than I thought.
But again, that could be addressed in the follow-up issue, because like, you know, we can make this is the default recommendation is use the admin theme, but you know, individual entity types could still make the decision to not use the admin theme under certain conditions, like you see with Node here. Although obviously there's some usability issues in Umami when you do that with the, for instance, the arrow not showing up next to revert.
Um, okay. And I guess I guess since this is sort of a global setting on the appearance page, but this is, this is really node specific, like creating content. Content usually means nodes in the Drupal backend. Should this same option affect other revision pages, or should this only affect nodes, or should we reword this?
I think that that setting should affect the editing of entity revisions as well. Because I know of plenty of sites that have content editors edit entities and they don't really distinguish between the two.
Yeah, I said that content usually refers to nodes. It's actually worse than that. Content is officially an ambiguous term in Drupal. There are entities, can be either content entities or config entities. So content in that sense includes taxonomy, media, all these things we're talking about that are revisionable. But then in the user interface, content often refers to nodes. So, okay, so Emily thinks it's a good idea to make this checkbox effective for all content types that are using the generic revision UI. Anyone want to agree or disagree with that?
I guess if this, yeah, are we still talking in the context of the node module? Because this, I think this only impacts the node module. Like if you, the setting being off isn't going to change, say, how you edit blocks, I believe, or media. So I wonder if
Well, let's see, the blocks already used the front end theme. The media, if I reload the page, the media already seems to respect that checkbox. So now all three of my revision tabs. I reload this. I'm sorry, wait a minute. Oh, this is media. So media, which is provided by this contrib module that I installed. Media seems to use the admin theme regardless. Node follows the checkbooks on the appearance page, and block always uses the front end theme. Again, media and block are provided by these contrib modules that I installed last night. And the suggestion is that we have this option on the appearance page apply by default to any type of entity, media, block, node, whatever. By default, we have this apply to any type that uses the generic revisions framework.
But then if you're always editing media in the admin UI, regardless of what that setting is set to, and then you have that disabled, but then you go to the revisions tab on a media entity, you'd be taken out of the admin UI to see that list in the front end theme and then go back to the admin UI, which would seem a bit of a weird experience. So maybe this should just stick to Node.
So I'm sorry, you're suggesting that That if
So-
I do enable this and then edit media, if I'm editing the media, I'm getting the,
Yeah, I think you're getting the admin theme regardless of what that setting is. So then if the revisions tab on media were to follow that setting, if you had it disabled, you would, when you go to the revisions tab, you would be taken to the front end theme from the admin theme.
Yeah, and that would definitely be an unfortunate experience. I think the problem for something like Block is that this revisions UI wasn't really, it's intended more for an admin type theme, which is why we're seeing the problems on the Block page.
so then what is the recommendation then? Should we make the default the admin theme? Should we make the default respect this option on the appearance page?
Yeah, but I'm changing my recommendation, I think, to following the admin theme. Because Aaron's right that it would be problematic if you were otherwise editing media on the admin theme and then ended up on the front end theme.
Yeah, and I think also like there's a lot of potential for what we can do with the revisions in the future. Like there's issues to look at, you know, support for parallel revisioning, which could change how this UI behaves. So it might be more beneficial to set a precedent that the revisions, at least the revisions list page, uses the admin theme. Because in the future, if we start introducing new functionality there and not every front end theme supports it, then you're gonna, you could end up with the same problems we saw in New Mami, where you said that drop down arrow is kind of hidden at first.
Right. So let's look again at the issue. Talked about local tasks, revert terminology. So I think the discussion on the issue, which probably Aaron you're familiar with, is that revert is perhaps inaccurate or confusing.
Yeah, I think there's definitely a separate issue that we might have even looked at before to discuss revert and potentially better terminology there. I would leave that to that specific issue because I feel like it's kind of a tricky discussion, or it has been.
Yeah, and also it was discussed on this issue and I guess on that related issue some time ago, back in 2020. Also, those were comments 108 and 109 that I was looking at. We're currently up to about 250, I think. Almost 250. So are there other questions about how this works that we want to suggest changes to at this point?
I just noticed as well that help text doesn't appear on this page, but it appears on the node one. So I think if there's a recommendation we can make, it's that there are some subtle parts of the UI that the node module has that are not present in the generic one, and that those should also be brought over. So maybe that's a recommendation we can make to keep this as consistent with node as possible.
So that consistency includes this bit of help text. It includes this highlighting.
Yeah.
It includes making the page use the admin theme by default. And I guess we're coming back to ignoring this particular option. Make it by default, but also make it easy for a module to override that default.
Right. I'm also, this is a completely separate issue, but I'm noticing that the breadcrumb for block is just terrible. Like home 1 revisions, like that's, I need to find, I'm gonna go find a separate issue about the block breadcrumb, because that's really not helpful.
That's right, but I think that's out of scope for this issue. What do we
Oh,
have on the
yeah.
breadcrumbs here? Just the home breadcrumb here for media and home, and then the node. So I guess the breadcrumbs are just determined by the path, right?
That's right, generally, yeah. And again, that's a totally separate issue that we could look at in the future, but it's just this really highlighted the problem with those breadcrumbs, because you don't really know. You're on the revisions tab. The only way you know where you are is by looking at the URL, and that's not an ideal experience.
That's right. This is one of the wonderful inconsistencies in Drupal. For blocks, if you go to block/1, you get the edit page. There is no page to view a block all by itself. For media, you have an option. Where is that option? Is it under configuration?
I think it's on each media I type, if I remember correctly.
So that would be structure, media types. And then I guess we were looking at an image media. No, I don't see the option there. I think it's a global option for the media module. So let's find the configuration link for media. Here it is.
I was incorrect.
So if we go back to this revisions tab for the media item and reload it now, yes, we get a breadcrumb. Because now media/15, which, as I said, breadcrumbs are just based on path, now gives a standalone page for that media item. Okay, but I'm sorry, I couldn't resist that digression, but it was a digression into the breadcrumbs. And as Aaron says, they're particularly unhelpful for blocks. That one is very unhelpful. Any other suggestions or recommendations? So we generally want to be more consistent with the node module. We want to make the admin theme the default, but make it easy to override that. Any other changes you'd like to see? Go ahead, Ralph.
Probably not directly something for this issue, but maybe for a follow-up. And it's overlapping with one gripe I have with the appearance page. With the checkbox, use administration, I totally agree with to have the admin theme the default setting. That I totally agree, but would it make sense maybe to move also in relation to the appearance pages to long meta issue we've created a while ago in the ideas queue, to move that checkbox out, because that way it might be possible to completely don't need the save configuration option anymore, and it could be just one tick and a consistent behavior across the whole page, and create in configuration something new. Because my problem, personally, I wouldn't have expected to find the option to individually configure what to use, either admin or the front end theme under appearance. And if you create a dedicated page under configuration, maybe, and make it a bit more bespoke, even though that people are able to, for example, definitely nothing for this issue, but to enable people to, for example, display for blocks in the front end, for nodes in the admin theme, for example. So people can adjust it after their like and their need, perhaps, and then would perhaps solve two issues in one.
Okay, so yeah, we certainly have discussed this admin page before, and there's this sort of confusing behavior that there are these links that sort of do an immediate action. And then there's this one little form section of the page for the admin theme. And this one select list and this checkbox that doesn't take effect until you submit the form. So I guess when we get around to dealing with that issue, perhaps we could replace this single checkbox with an option for different entity types, and say use the admin theme for editing nodes or media or blocks or taxonomy terms. So is that sort of what you're suggesting, Ralph?
Yep. And move that option out of the appearance page, because I'm not sure if I would have expected it there, the option to set it and configure it.
Yeah, I'd sort of second that, in that one thing we've discussed before on these calls is that we shouldn't have one screen doing too many different things for the exact problems that were just discussed. So in the same way we introduce things like a role settings page, and trying to think of other examples, but I know there's other things we've done like that. I think definitely moving that section at the bottom out of this page would be a good idea.
So there's already settings, which involves global settings and then settings for each theme. So not related to the revisions UI, but but maybe a simple change would be to take this one section down here and move it over to the settings page. Would that be a more logical place for it?
For the checkbox, maybe yes. For the select box, I'm not sure if it would be a better choice to have the same, if it's technically possible. I'm not a developer, but if it would be possible, like for example, for the default theme, you have just the link set as default, to have also a button like set as admin. So that you're able.
Don't we already have an issue to actually do that? Because I remember we
Yes.
created a bunch of different issues like that, and I'm sure
Yes.
that was one of them.
Yes, but in that issue, we moved the button functionality with set as admin, as well as the checkbox up to the admin active admin theme. But I wanted we could move the functionality out of the page, and that you just set on the appearance page just which themes are installed and which themes are uninstalled and which is the default and which is set as admin. And that's all. That would be way more clear and a consistent activation and deactivation functionality.
Okay, I'd like to bring the discussion back to the revisions UI. We only have a little less than 10 minutes left. So Aaron, since you've already been active on that issue, would you like to leave a comment summarizing this discussion?
Yeah, that's fine. I can do that. And so it sounds like the main point is that we want this to be consistent with the revision UI in Node. And I think that, but there was a specific point about the styling, that yellow color on the current revision.
And the help
And
text.
yeah, and that would be part of bringing that consistency. And then I think that is mostly, I suppose, is it worth mentioning about the option on the appearance page, or I feel like maybe we just leave that for a separate issue. Because I think, or oh, sorry, it was the other thing was that we wanted to recommend that the revisions tab always use the admin theme, I think was the other recommendation there.
Right. Ralph agrees that we should leave that for a separate issue. And yes, I think the consensus is that we should make the admin theme the default, but make it easy to override that default.
Yeah.
And possibly following the option on the appearance page should be one of the things that's easy to implement. But that could definitely be deferred to a later issue.
Yeah, sounds good.
Okay. I don't think we have time to bring up another issue. I do want to mention that I will be on vacation next week. So would anyone like to volunteer to lead next week's meeting?
I'm happy to do it. I saw your comment in Slack. I was going to reply in there, but I can do that unless anybody else wants to.
Okay, thank you, Aaron. The Zoom meeting should happen on schedule and will be recorded automatically. You don't have to worry about that. And I'll take care of editing the recording when I get back from vacation. Any last comments on the revisions UI before we close out the meeting? Okay, well, thank you all for coming. Again, for the people who are new to the meeting, if you comment on the issue for today's meeting, I'll paste the link into the Zoom chat again. If you comment there, or if you give me your Drupal.org username in the Slack channel, then I'll make sure that you get credit for attending this meeting, and hope you'll come to future meetings as well. We do appreciate the different points of view of not only front and back end developers, which we often have, site builders and designers, but also people who have long experience with Drupal, but also we need the point of view of beginners, people who are seeing it with fresh eyes. That's really helpful for usability discussions.
Thanks, Benji.
Yeah, thanks everyone. Thanks, Benji.
Thanks, Benji, and have a nice weekend, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. Have a nice week.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye bye. Thanks.